In the western kingdom of Eldoria, beyond the silver rivers and the misty pines, there lived a man whom the townsfolk called Jack the Fool. His beard was uneven, his clothes stitched from scraps of color, and his laughter echoed through every alley of the royal city. Yet behind his wild eyes, there stirred a calm awareness that few could name and fewer could understand. Each morning, Jack wandered the cobbled streets with a carved wooden stick between his legs, pretending it was a stallion. Children followed him, cheering and clapping, merchants sighed, guards frowned, and noblewomen crossed themselves as if to ward off madness. But when Jack spoke, his words, though tangled in jest, often struck nearer to truth than any sermon or decree. At the center of Eldoria stood the citadel of King Roland, a vast fortress of marble towers and golden banners. Roland was strong, clever, and proud. He loved justice, but he loved his throne even more. Around him gathered counselors and generals, each vying for favor. Among them, the most trusted was Lord Edward of Clyne, a minister known for his diplomacy and his unshakable loyalty. Rumors about Jack had reached the marble halls many times. Some said he was a mad beggar who mocked the crown to hide his crimes. Others whispered that he was once a scholar who, after glimpsing the vanity of the world, chose folly as armor. Roland dismissed such talk until the day an official came before the court and declared, "Sire, the fool who calls himself Jack is no fool at all. He only acts insane so that he may speak freely against your rule." The king raised an eyebrow. "Then he is cleverer than most who call themselves wise." The court laughed, yet curiosity took root in Roland's mind. That afternoon, as the bells of Vesper rang, Jack wandered into the market square. A guard, known for arrogance, stopped him. "What's in your bag, fool? Counterfeit goods? Stolen bread?" Jack bowed deeply. "Search away, good sir, and when you find nothing, perhaps you will next search your own conscience. If the king appoints such a man to watch the people, then perhaps the first counterfeit lies not in my bag, but upon the throne that gave you power." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The guard reddened, unsure whether to strike or laugh along. When news of this encounter reached the palace, the tale spread like wind through wheat. Later that week, Judge Benedict, the chief Qazi of the realm, sought to understand Jack. He met him beside the city well, where Jack was feeding crumbs to birds. "Tell me, Jack," said Benedict, "why do you mock those who rule, yet help the beggars in secret?" Jack answered softly, "When I see a hungry man fed by another, I rejoice, for I see a spark of mercy. But when I see a poor man ignored by those who wear silk, my heart weeps. I cannot fight with swords, so I fight with words." Benedict watched him for a long moment, and then went to the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "the fool's tongue may be sharp, but his deeds are gentle. He gives more bread to the hungry than half your nobles combined." Roland said nothing, though he kept the name Jack in his thoughts. A month later came troubling news. A rebellion had begun in the northern highlands, led by a proud noble named Lord Alaric Thorne. The council trembled at the thought of war. Roland summoned his minister Edward. "Ride north," commanded the king. "End this without bloodshed, if you can. If you succeed, you may build whatever monument you wish in the capital." Edward bowed. "Then grant me, sire, to build a grand church to the glory of God and of Eldoria." Roland agreed, though he smiled at the minister's ambition. Before departing, the king sought solitude in the forest monastery. He called his captain, Sir Marcus, and said, "Guard my throne. Let no soul sit upon it. But treat that fool kindly, for I would test what sort of madness dwells in him." Sir Marcus obeyed. Yet not long after the king's departure, Jack wandered into the empty throne room. His eyes fixed upon the golden chair that shone beneath the high windows. Slowly he approached, then sat upon it, resting his wooden stick across his knees. When Marcus entered, he froze in outrage. "Get off that seat, lunatic! None may sit there save the king himself." Jack smiled sadly. Strange, isn't it, how this chair burns, though it is made of gold. The longer one sits upon it, the hotter it grows, until the soul within is scorched. People fight and die to sit here, never seeing the fire beneath. Marcus thought him mocking the crown. Enraged, he struck Jack and cast him into the courtyard. Days later, King Roland returned. When he learned what had happened, his face darkened. "Did I not command you to treat him kindly?" he roared. "For disobeying me, you shall be flogged." The guards dragged Marcus away. When Jack appeared before the throne again, his face was bruised, but his gaze was calm. The king said, "Forgive the captain's cruelty." Jack bowed and replied, "I do not weep for myself, O king, but for you. If sitting here for a moment earned me such punishment, what of the man who sits here day and night, crushing others for power? His punishment will come not from a captain, but from God himself." A silence swept the hall. The courtiers shifted uneasily. The king lowered his eyes, for the fool's words pierced deeper than any sword. Meanwhile, in the north, Lord Edward negotiated peace. He returned triumphant, and the king kept his promise. He granted land and gold to build the new church. When it was finished, Edward named it St. Clara's Chapel after his beloved wife. He wished her name to live forever in marble. One night, however, the caretaker discovered that the plaque had been replaced. Where once it read St. Clara's Chapel, it now said Jack's Chapel. Outraged, Edward hurried to the palace. "Sire, the fool has mocked the sacred house." Roland ordered Jack to appear. When he did, the king asked, "Why did you change the name of my minister's church?" Jack answered, "When Lord Edward was building it, I asked him for whom it was built. He said, for the glory of God. Yet he carved another name upon it. The one who builds for God cares not whose name adorns the wall. The one who seeks glory for himself builds not for heaven, but for vanity." Edward flushed with shame. The court murmured. The king, though silent, felt again the sting of truth. The Fool of Eldoria, Part 2. After the matter of the church was settled, quiet days returned to Eldoria, though beneath the calm of its sunlit courtyards, the seeds of reflection began to stir. King Roland, once certain of every decree, now found himself pausing before signing new orders. The echo of Jack's words clung to him like the chill of early dawn. The one who seeks glory for himself builds not for heaven. He wondered whether the towers he had raised in his own name would also crumble in the judgment of time. Jack continued to wander the city. Some feared him, others began to greet him with shy respect. He spent his mornings near the river, mending fishermen's nets with his clumsy fingers, or helping the washerwomen carry their baskets. He asked nothing in return. When people thanked him, he only smiled and said, "A fool can still lighten a burden." One day, while he rested beneath the willow trees, a rider approached, the young Prince Adrian, heir to the throne, proud and restless. Seeing Jack lying on the grass, the prince scoffed. "Get up, old fool. You waste the day while men of worth train with sword and steed." Jack looked up, shielding his eyes from the light. "And when all that training is done, my prince, will you know how to rest? The one who never learns to be still may one day fight without knowing why." The prince frowned, for no one had ever spoken to him so. Yet he rode away thinking of the words. In the royal chambers that evening, King Roland sat alone. The moonlight spilled over his table, where maps and letters lay. He thought of the Northern Rebellion, of the church, and of the fool's uninvited wisdom. For the first time, he wondered if true counsel could dwell outside his circle of nobles. When dawn came, he summoned Jack. "You speak freely," said the king. "Tell me, should a ruler ever trust a fool?" Jack bowed slightly. "If the fool speaks truth, yes. If the wise man flatters, no." For the tongue that tastes only honey cannot tell when the wine has turned bitter. Roland's lips curved in a faint smile. And if I were to give you a task, to judge a matter among men, would you accept it? I would, said Jack, but only if you promise not to punish me when I tell the truth. The king laughed, though uneasily. So be it. Tomorrow you shall judge a quarrel between two merchants who have worn out even my patience. The next day the merchants appeared before the throne. One claimed the other had stolen a chest of silver. The second swore it was payment for a debt long forgotten. Both spoke loudly, waving their hands, drowning each other in accusations. Jack listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Let the chest be brought here." When it arrived, he asked each man to lift it. The first did so easily. The second strained and stumbled. Jack nodded. The lighter heart bears the heavier load more easily. This chest belongs to the one who lifted it without fear. The crowd murmured at the strange judgment, but the king saw wisdom in it. Later, when the case was examined by record, it was proved that Jack's decision had been just. Roland felt a quiet satisfaction. Perhaps, he said to his counselors, madness and truth drink from the same cup. As seasons passed, storms of fate again gathered beyond Eldoria's borders. A neighboring realm, Valmir, grew envious of Roland's peace and prosperity. Its ruler, Duke Severin, began to stir unrest among border towns. Reports of skirmishes reached the palace. Roland's generals demanded war. But one night, walking through the silent gardens, the king found Jack sitting by a fountain, watching the reflection of the stars. "Jack," said Roland softly, "my neighbors prepare for war. Tell me, should I strike before they do?" Jack pointed at the water. "See how the moonlight dances upon the ripples. Each wave tries to reach the moon, yet the moon remains untouched. The first to strike the water only breaks his own reflection." The king looked at the trembling surface and sighed. "Then I shall wait." Weeks later, an envoy arrived from Valmir bearing peace terms. The duke, frightened by the sight of Roland's disciplined army along the border, wished to end the dispute without bloodshed. The king signed the treaty with calm dignity. The people rejoiced, and once again they whispered of the strange power of the fool whose riddles kept war from their gates. But not all were pleased. Some nobles muttered that Jack's influence had grown dangerous. They whispered in corridors that no crown should bend its ear to madness. Chief among them was Lord Hawthorne, an ambitious baron who coveted the minister's seat. He conspired to turn the king's patience into doubt. One afternoon, when the king sat in council, Hawthorne said, "Your Majesty, this fool wanders freely through your halls, mocking law and reason. Let him be tested. If his wisdom be true, the trial will prove it. If not, he shall trouble us no longer." Roland agreed reluctantly, and the test was arranged. Jack was brought before the court. Hawthorne placed 3 cups on the table, one with wine, one with water, one with poison. "Choose wisely," sneered the baron. "Drink and show us if heaven protects your wisdom." Jack looked at the cups and smiled faintly. The wise man knows that all 3 may kill if drunk in pride. Yet the fool who trusts in God need not drink at all. He tipped all 3 onto the floor. The wine stained the marble. The water washed it clean. The poison hissed and left a dark mark. The king rose astonished. "He has chosen better than any sage," Roland said, for he saw that no test born of arrogance deserves an answer. Hawthorne bowed, hiding his fury. And so the legend of Jack deepened. He continued to live among the poor, yet the gates of the palace opened for him whenever he wished. The people said that he walked between 2 worlds, the humble alleys of men and the shining halls of power, belonging fully to neither. The years turned, the prince grew older, and the king, burdened by time, leaned ever more upon reflection. He would often visit the fool in the marketplace, disguised in a cloak, to hear what words passed among the common folk. Jack knew him at once, but never betrayed the disguise. He would simply say, "Tell the king that the crown grows lighter when shared with compassion." Roland would return to the palace with that single sentence burning in his heart. The Fool of Eldoria, Part 3. Years rolled onward like a slow river over ancient stones. The realm of Eldoria entered a long peace. The fields yielded their golden grain, the rivers carried trade from distant valleys, and the bells of the churches rang over roofs newly mended after past troubles. Yet, peace, as always, gave birth to pride, and pride began to gnaw at the hearts of those who had once feared war. Jack still wandered through the streets, though his hair had turned silver, and his wooden stick, his make-believe horse, was smooth from years of handling. Children who once chased him now brought their own sons and daughters to hear his riddles. They would watch the fool trace shapes in the dust and speak of things too simple for the clever to understand. One morning, while the dew still clung to the grass, King Roland rode from the palace with only 2 guards. He found Jack sitting beside the city gate, mending a beggar's torn cloak. The king dismounted quietly. "Old friend," Roland said, "I have built towers, dug canals, and written laws, yet still the hearts of men crave more. Tell me, is a kingdom ever truly content?" Jack looked up, his eyes gentle. A field is content when it bears fruit. A man is content when he bears mercy. But a kingdom made only of walls and soldiers will never rest, for stone hungers for more stone. The king smiled faintly. "Then perhaps I have built too many walls." Jack tied the last thread in the beggar's cloak and answered, "Knock one down in kindness, and you will find your people waiting on the other side." That evening, Roland ordered that the palace gates remain open until sunset, so that any subject might bring petition without fear. The courtiers whispered that the king had gone soft, but the people blessed his name. The following winter was harsh. Snow sealed the mountain passes, and famine touched the outer villages. Caravans could not reach the capital. Lord Hawthorne, ever watchful, saw in hardship a path to power. He urged the council to raise taxes, claiming that the crown must fill its granaries before all else. When the decree was announced, the markets fell silent. Bread prices soared, and beggars froze in the alleys. Jack wandered among them, sharing the little he had. One night, as he knelt beside a dying man, he murmured, "The rich build barns, the poor build prayers. Only the prayers reach heaven." The word spread. Within days, crowds gathered before the palace to protest. Roland stood at the balcony and saw anger in the faces of those he once called his children. He turned to Hawthorne. "You promised order," he said, "and brought despair." Hawthorne replied coldly, "Mercy feeds no army, Majesty." At that moment, Jack stepped through the crowd and bowed deeply. If hunger is the enemy, let the fool fight it first. He walked to the royal granary, broke the seal, and began handing loaves to the people. The guards hesitated, the king watched from above. Then Roland descended the steps himself and helped distribute the bread. When the last loaf was given, Jack looked up at him. "See, Majesty, an army has been fed without a single sword drawn." The famine eased, and the people's loyalty returned, but Hawthorne's envy festered deeper. One summer day, messengers arrived from distant provinces, rumors of plague along the trade roads. The council trembled. Some urged closing the city gates, Others cried for burning the sick. The king looked to Jack, who stood quietly by a column. "Speak," said Roland. "What would the fool advise when death knocks at the door?" Jack answered, "Close the door, and death will climb through the window. Burn the sick, and you will set fire to your own soul. Tend them, feed them, and you may yet find that mercy heals what fear cannot." The king listened. He turned the palace hall into a house of care, where monks and healers worked side by side. Jack served among them, washing wounds, bringing water, and whispering prayers that were half jokes and half tears. Months passed before the sickness waned. The city buried its dead, but its heart grew kinder. Roland decreed that every year henceforth, a festival of remembrance would honor both the lost and the living. The people called it the Day of Light, and in their songs they placed Jack's name beside the saints. Age began to weigh upon the king. His hair whitened, his sword arm weakened, and nights became longer than days. The prince, now a man grown and wise beyond his youth, urged him to rest. One quiet evening, Roland called for Jack. "Old friend," he said, "you once told me the throne burns like fire. I feel its heat now. Tell me, how shall a king lay down his crown without shame?" Jack gazed at the fading sun through the window. When the candle's work is done, it does not fear the dark. It has already given its light. Rule until you have no more light to give, and then let another carry the flame. The next morning, the king announced that upon the coming spring, he would pass the crown to his son. The court gasped, but the people rejoiced. For the first time in Eldoria's history, a ruler chose peace over power. The winter before the coronation was bitter yet bright. Jack grew frail, though his laughter still warmed the coldest corners of a city. One night, as snow fell like white ashes, he disappeared from his small cottage. At dawn, the guards found him sitting by the river, his wooden horse beside him, his face serene. He had slipped quietly beyond life. The news reached the palace. King Roland, moved to tears, ordered that the fool be buried in the royal garden. A simple stone marked the place. Here lies Jack, who rode a stick and taught a king to see. Years later, travelers passing through Eldoria still told the story of the madman who humbled a kingdom. And in every tale, the moral was the same. True wisdom hides beneath humility, and power without compassion destroys itself.